They didn't just steal her name, they stole the melody of her life and forced her to clap for the thief. For years, Madison Cole was the silent shadow in the halls, the woman told to be grateful for crumbs while her empire was built on a lie. They mistook her silence for surrender. They forgot that silence, when deep enough, becomes the foundation of an earthquake. On the exact moment her sister stood under the glittering altar, ready to claim the final piece of the Cole legacy, Madison, the dismissed, the forgotten, walked in. Not as a guest, but as the only name now etched on the deed to the entire collapsing dynasty. Revenge wasn't just healing, it was the ultimate wedding gift.
Before we begin this story, let me know where you are listening from in the comments below.
My name is Madison Cole. I'm 33 years old. And what I'm about to tell you today will forever change the way you see your own family. The chandeliers above hummed faintly, scattering gold across the marble like glitter from some careless god. The Halcyon, Olivia's wedding venue, gleamed as if Los Angeles itself had been pressed into glass and sold back at a profit. Waiters rehearsed their movements with military grace, florists adjusted petals with trembling reverence, and the violinist played a melody too elegant to feel alive. I stood at the edge of the ballroom, invisible, watching my sister move through her kingdom. Olivia Cole, in a silk rehearsal dress that caught the light just enough to make her look untouchable. Her laughter rose above the music, a sound I'd once loved and now could barely recognize. 10 years. 10 years of silence, of pretending that invisibility was peace. I ran my hand along the tall window frame I had designed a lifetime ago, my first concept sketch, born in a cheap apartment that smelled of takeout and ambition. The shape was still mine, but the color wasn't. Someone had painted over the wood, sealing my initials under a perfect coat of pearly white. 10 years of living in their reflection. When does it end? Madison. Olivia's voice floated across the room like perfume. Could you not stand there? That seat's for the strategic partners. You understand, right? A polite smile, a dagger wrapped in etiquette. Of course, I said evenly. Wouldn't want to confuse the seating chart. She had already turned away. She didn't hear me. Not really. No one here ever did. The laughter resumed, spilling like champagne. The chandeliers flickered. My body went cold, the kind of cold that wakes you. My nails dug crescents into my palms until pain bloomed beneath the skin. It wasn't rage, it was recognition. They would never give me a seat at their table because the table was never built for people like me. I exhaled. The decision had already been made. I just hadn't said it out loud yet. I moved quietly, circling the room. Staff glanced up, some of them my old interns, pretending not to know me. Yet a few eyes lingered, offering small nods, a silent rebellion that steadied me more than applause ever could. Every surface here carried my ghost, the symmetry of the floral arch, the soft uplighting that curved like dawn, the restraint in color that people mistook for luxury. My restraint. My work. My shadow. Outside, the Pacific glimmered through the glass, a horizon I once thought symbolized freedom. Now it just reminded me of distance. I stepped onto the terrace, letting the ocean air slice through the scent of roses and ego. Los Angeles stretched below, loud, glowing, and merciless. A city that only loved you when you screamed. I had learned to whisper instead, and in that quiet, I'd built something far greater than applause. My reflection in the glass door looked older than 33, and yet sharper, steadier. Not the orphan they rescued, not the grateful assistant, not the background architect. Just me, finally me. From the ballroom, Olivia's voice carried again, warm and poisonous. Don't wander, Maddie. We'll need you for the toast. I smiled. Wouldn't miss it, I murmured, knowing I already had. The drone camera hovered near the ceiling, its small red light blinking judgment. The partners, strategic, elite, temporary, took their seats. One of them complimented Olivia on her vision. I wondered if she'd ever notice how much of her vision had been mine. Probably not. That was the cruelty of talent hidden behind gratitude. It teaches you to applaud your own erasure. I pushed through the terrace doors and inhaled the wind. Salt. Metal. Memory. I reached for my phone. At the top of my messages was the thread that had waited for years. Attorney. All legal. Ready when you are. My thumb hovered. One word would start the chain. One word would undo a decade of silence. Not yet. Patience. They taught me invisibility. I turned it into strategy. They taught me how to survive. I learned how to own. A round of laughter rose again behind me, hollow and bright. I turned back to the ballroom, watching them toast to an empire they didn't know was already shifting under their feet. For a moment, pity brushed against me. How small they looked, mistaking cruelty for elegance. The violin stopped. Applause, flashbulbs. Olivia practiced her entrance, bathed in golden light. She was perfect. The crowd adored perfection. But perfection was brittle. It cracks quietly before it breaks. I touched the painted window frame one last time. Beneath the surface, my initials still slept in the wood grain, proof that truth doesn't disappear. It just waits. 10 years ago, I believed recognition was given. Tonight, I understood it's taken. I straightened my spine, adjusted my jacket, and walked out, heels steady against marble. The laughter, the music, the performance, all of it faded behind me. When I came back, it wouldn't be as the forgotten sister. Not as a guest, not as a ghost. It would be as the owner. I whispered it to the wind, letting the word cut through the noise like a vow. Ownership doesn't shout, it signs. And I had already signed. I used to believe gratitude was a virtue, that to say thank you often enough could soften a hard world. But gratitude in the Cole household was never kindness, it was currency. A quiet tax you paid for being allowed to exist. I was 16 when I first heard Diane say it. She stood in the kitchen, all pearls and precision, the morning sun cutting through her like it knew better. You should be grateful, honey. Without us, you'd still be nothing. Her voice had no malice, just conviction. The kind that doesn't think it's cruel. At the time, I nodded. I thought she was right. I was a foster kid who drew buildings in the margins of my math homework, whose only family came with a contract and a set of unspoken rules. The first, never outshine Olivia. The second, never forget who paid for the lights that let you draw. The Coles were philanthropists on paper, empire builders in practice, real estate, events, branding. Their names shimmered on every glass tower that cast a shadow over downtown LA. I was the quiet girl they rescued from the system, the charity project that turned out to have an eye for design. They loved that story. It made them seem generous. And for a while, I played my part. At 21, I was drafting blueprints in a corner office I didn't deserve. At least, that's what Diane reminded me. Olivia would sweep in wearing vintage silk, drop her bag on my desk, and call me the genius behind my ideas. Cameras flashed. She smiled. I smiled back. That was the choreography. You should be grateful, honey. The phrase repeated, like an inheritance. Sometimes it came after a dinner where I wasn't introduced. Sometimes after a deal I closed, but she signed. It became a lullaby for exhaustion. At 3 a.m., I'd still be in that sterile office, the glow of my monitor painting blue light across unpaid overtime. I'd whisper it to myself to stay calm. You should be grateful, honey. Because gratitude was cheaper than confrontation. They said I was family. Yet every time Olivia's success grew, a small part of me vanished behind her shadow, like a light dimming under layers of glass. She had the confidence of someone who never had to earn permission to take up space. I admired her for that once. Now I saw it for what it was: inherited arrogance, gift-wrapped as charm. Still, I told myself I owed them everything: the education, the job, the life that looked stable from the outside. I mistook dependence for devotion. But the thing about debt is, it never ends when kindness is conditional. I remember one night in particular, the night everything started to shift. Olivia had just landed a feature in Lux Living magazine for her visionary leadership in sustainable design. I was the one who built the actual model, the eco-construction algorithms, the structural flow, the energy optimization, but her name was the only one that mattered. She threw a party at the Halcyon before it was ours, before I bought it under another name. Everyone was there: city officials, investors, the kind of people who laugh as though applause might follow. Olivia clinked her glass and announced, "To my team, especially my sister Madison, who makes everything I dream possible." Applause. A spotlight brushed my face, then slid off me like water. Later, when the guests thinned, I found Diane by the bar, swirling her drink. "That was kind of her," I said, to mention me. Diane smiled, that gentle smile she used for discipline. "Of course, darling. You're part of the family. You should be grateful." There it was again. The mantra. The chain. That night, I walked home instead of taking the car they sent. Downtown hummed beneath me, the concrete still warm from the day. I passed the same shelter I'd once slept in, and for the first time, instead of shame, I felt something else: an ember of fury. Small, but bright. Because if they could take credit for my work, they could also take my history, my narrative, my becoming. And that, I would not let happen. From then on, every act of gratitude became an act of rebellion in disguise. Each thank you was a note in a symphony they didn't realize I was composing. While they celebrated their name, I learned how to build one without theirs. I spent years studying contracts, understanding ownership clauses, building networks that didn't lead back to the coals. I founded a quiet entity under a borrowed name, Aurora Events, a design firm that no one connected to me. While Olivia took credit for the luxury brand side, I handled the real work: the people, the logistics, the architecture of power. And the people remembered me: the small contractors, the vendors who stayed until dawn, the ones she never learned the names of. I kept working, building, surviving. Every "be grateful" turned into another brick in the empire I was silently constructing. It took me 10 years to understand that gratitude isn't always grace. Sometimes it's just control wearing perfume. Diane still sent holiday cards. Perfect calligraphy, no warmth. Richard would leave messages on birthdays, offering advice about humility. Olivia sent nothing. Silence had always been her favorite form of superiority. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is a short-term fuel. I was something better. Focused. The burden of gratitude had burned down to ash, and beneath it there was something clean, sharp, and alive. The truth. I was never nothing without them. They were just terrified I might prove it. Silence has a texture. It isn't empty. It hums. In those 10 years, I learned to live inside that hum, to let it sharpen me instead of swallow me. The Coles believed I'd faded into the polite anonymity of forgotten relatives. An ex-employee, a distant sister too timid to ask for her share. They assumed my quiet meant defeat. But silence was my camouflage. While they were clinking glasses in Malibu and shaking hands at charity galas, I was in warehouses, workrooms, and late-night calls with men who didn't wear suits, but built empires with their hands. Aurora Events began as a whisper. Just a side project under a name that couldn't be traced back to me. The logo was modest, the website almost plain. But behind that simplicity was precision. Every client, every deal, every project was chosen like a chess move. I didn't want fame. I wanted leverage. My first contract came from a florist who'd once worked under Olivia's company. He called me after midnight, voice trembling with frustration. "They underpaid me again," he said. "2 months behind, and they still demand exclusivity." I met him the next day in a tiny coffee shop off Fairfax. He expected pity. I offered partnership. "We'll rebuild your client list," I told him. "You'll work under Aurora now. Fair pay, clear contracts." He looked at me like I'd handed him a second chance. And in a way, I had. That's how it began. A slow rescue mission disguised as a business model. From there, Aurora grew quietly. A lighting designer from San Diego, a catering startup in Palm Springs, photographers, event planners, decorators, all the people Olivia's company had stepped on while climbing to the top. They didn't even know they were reuniting under my banner. I built Aurora to be invisible. No press, no names, just results. Within 3 years, we were managing events for mid-level clients across California. By the 5th, luxury brands were reaching out, but only to the owner on paper, Elias Ward, my trusted legal consultant, who let me operate through his name while I stayed in the shadows. He'd once asked me, "Why stay hidden? You could take credit now." "Because they're still watching," I said. "Let them think I've gone soft. You can't defend against a ghost." By year 7, I had enough capital to buy my first property, a small coastal estate once owned by a bankrupt developer who'd done business with the Coles. It felt poetic, signing those papers. The notary glanced at me over his glasses. "Halcyon Holdings LLC?" he read aloud. "That's you?" I nodded. "It will be." That name, Halcyon, had haunted me since the night of Olivia's magazine party. It symbolized everything they built on borrowed talent and stolen credit. So I took it, claimed it, made it legal. The next years blurred into one another. Strategy meetings in hotel lobbies, spreadsheets coded with aliases, quiet celebrations that no one photographed. I watched Olivia's company overextend itself. Lavish weddings, extravagant events, debt tucked beneath polish. They still looked golden, but gold can be plated. I wasn't cruel enough to enjoy their mistakes, but I cataloged everyone. A delayed permit here, a lawsuit there. Every vulnerability was a pin waiting to be pulled. And then came the moment I'd been building toward, the Halcyon Estate in Malibu. A private resort, oceanfront, iconic, the kind of property developers drooled over and investors fought for. The Coles had long wanted it, but never managed to finalize the permits. I'd been watching, waiting. When the owner's company went into quiet liquidation, I was already in position. The offer went in under Halcyon Holdings LLC. The paperwork was clean, airtight. By the time anyone realized the estate had a new owner, and her name was on every signature line. I remember sitting in that echoing room as I signed the final document. The pen was heavy, gold-tipped. My attorney Ward slid the folder toward me. "Congratulations," he said. "You just bought their crown jewel." I didn't smile right away. The silence stretched, the weight of 10 years pressing against the page. I traced the letters of my name, Madison Cole, and for the first time, it looked like it belonged to me. A small thought flickered. Could there have been another way? Could I have confronted them, demanded credit, fought fair? No. Fairness was a privilege of those already seen. "They only understand one language," I whispered. "Power." Ward glanced at me, uncertain whether to agree. "Then you speak it fluently now." I did. But the fluency came with a cost. In silence, you start to forget how to be soft. Every choice becomes strategy. Every kindness feels like risk. I'd built an empire, yes, but I'd built it alone. That night, I stood on the balcony of my newly acquired Malibu property. The Pacific stretched endless, indifferent. The wind cut through my hair, and for a brief second I felt it. The hollow victory of success earned without witnesses. The house was beautiful. My design, my taste. Glass, stone, restraint. A structure built to frame the ocean, not compete with it. It was everything I'd ever wanted. But the view didn't soothe me. It mirrored me. Calm on the surface, storm beneath. Inside, my phone buzzed. Olivia's name lit the screen for the first time in years. A text. Heard you're still doing events? Hope you're happy, Maddie. We're preparing for my wedding. Biggest one yet. Wish you could see it. I looked out at the water, the waves rolling toward shore like a slow applause. Oh, I'll see it, I whispered. And I meant it. Because the Halcyon, their dream venue, was mine now. The empire I'd built in silence was ready to speak. Morning in Los Angeles never just arrives, it performs. The sky stretched too blue, the ocean too calm, the light too flawless to be anything but deceitful. The Halcyon glittered under that perfection, filled with the hum of rehearsals and the clinking of crystal. Olivia's wedding was only hours away, and she was in her element, commanding, adored, radiant. I stood by the entrance, unseen but observing. This place, this monument of glass and ego, was technically mine. No one else knew that yet. The ownership transfer had gone through days ago, but I wanted to see it all one last time. The empire they believed they built, and the woman they thought had vanished. I meant to stay silent. But silence, I've learned, always tempts fate. Richard Cole saw me first. Still sharp, still smug, wearing authority like a tailored suit. He smiled as he approached. "Well, if it isn't Maddie," he said, tone warm but lined with condescension. "Didn't expect to see you up here with the investors. You helping the staff again?" "Just observing," I said. He laughed, the kind of laugh that doesn't expect an answer. "You're talented, sure, but not really our kind of talented. Some people run the show, others set the stage, and that's okay. You've always been useful." His hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and dismissive. For a second I couldn't breathe. Not from pain, but from recognition. 10 years of endurance crystallized into a single calm thought. Enough. I smiled, polite and sharp. Of course, I never forget my place. Then I turned away, my steps steady toward the terrace. The ocean wind met me like a dare. I pulled out my phone, opened the message thread that had waited for years, and typed one word: now. The reply came almost instantly. Lawyer. Done. All legal. Under Madison Cole Enterprises. I stared at the message until the words settled like gravity. Then I typed again. Me. Good. Make sure no one else gets used again. Showtime. The send tone was quiet, final. Inside, laughter rose again. Olivia's, warm and unearned. "Dad, can you believe this view? It feels like it was made for me." I smiled at the irony. It was. Every inch of this building had passed through my hands, the layout, the light, even the damn windows. The Halcyon was mine long before the papers said so. Through the glass, I watched her spin in the spotlight, radiant and confident. She had no idea that the marble beneath her heels now carried my name, that every signature had already shifted from Cole Holdings to me. Still, something inside me hesitated. Not guilt, just the ghost of the girl they'd once molded. For a moment, I felt her trembling in my chest, wondering if this was justice or revenge. Then my phone buzzed again. Ethan Brooks. "You did it, didn't you?" "Yes." Maddie, this isn't a business move, it's a declaration. I looked at the horizon. They declared first, I said. Ethan exhaled. Through the line. You know, once this starts, there's no going back. I don't need to go back, I said. I built forward. When I ended the call, I stood for a long time on the terrace, watching sunlight scatter over the Pacific. Inside, music swelled and laughter echoed, a celebration of illusions. Olivia was giving a speech, thanking our partners and family for their faith in us. Her voice was honeyed, rehearsed. The crowd adored her. I almost pitied them. They were raising glasses to a future that didn't belong to them anymore. By late afternoon, I was walking through the ballroom again, tracing my steps like closing a loop. The vendors nodded at me, subtle, knowing. They didn't understand the full story, but they sensed something had shifted. Power, when reclaimed, changes the air. Olivia caught sight of me. Maddie, don't wander off. We'll need you for the toast. I met her gaze and smiled faintly. Wouldn't miss it, I said softly, meaning every word differently than she imagined. The chandeliers above reflected her face, glowing and blind. She turned away before she could notice the faint tremor of unease beginning to ripple through the room, the unspoken awareness that something had changed, though no one could name it yet. By sunset, the paperwork was confirmed. Every right, every license, every property connected to the Halcyon now fell under Madison Cole Enterprises. On paper, the shift was seamless. In truth, it was seismic. I lingered on the terrace as the last of the staff cleared the floor. The ocean darkened, the horizon bruised gold. For the first time, I felt the weight of ownership, not as conquest, but as closure. Richard's words replayed in my mind. Some people run the show, others set the stage. He was right. I had set the stage. Every light, every cue, every line of this performance. But tonight, I'd written the ending. The sea breeze pulled at my hair. I took one last look at the ballroom, glowing with artificial perfection, and whispered to no one in particular. They wanted me to know my place. Now they'll know it too. Then I turned, heels clicking against marble that now answered to my name, and walked away into the sound of the ocean. The only applause I needed. The night after the rehearsal, I didn't sleep. The city hummed below my balcony like a restless secret, lights blinking across the Pacific as if the world couldn't decide whether to shine or burn. Papers were signed, contracts sealed, ownership transferred. On paper I had won, but power has a strange silence to it, an echo that sounds a lot like loneliness. I sat at my desk, laptop open, staring at the finalized document, Halcyon Holdings, wholly owned by Madison Cole Enterprises. It didn't even look real. My name, my real name, on everything that used to be theirs. Yet, instead of triumph, all I felt was stillness. Ethan Brooks called just after midnight. His voice was calm but edged, like someone walking through a room of glass. "Are you awake?" he asked. "I haven't been asleep in 10 years, I said. He chuckled softly, then grew serious. "Maddie, we need to talk about tomorrow." "About the wedding?" "About what happens after," he corrected. "If you execute the full plan, it won't just humiliate them. It'll destroy them. Their finances, their company, their reputation. You know that, right?" I looked out at the city lights, the reflection of my own face hovering in the glass like a ghost. "They destroyed enough people on their way up," I said. "Maybe this is balance." Ethan sighed. "Balance doesn't always mean justice. Sometimes it just means another form of cruelty." His words landed quietly but deep. I didn't answer right away. Outside, the ocean whispered in waves, steady and patient, as if waiting for me to decide what kind of woman I wanted to be. "Ethan," I said finally, "this isn't about revenge anymore. This is about ending a cycle. People got hurt because no one ever stopped them. I'm stopping them. He hesitated. Then at least promise me you'll remember who you were before all this. I didn't answer. The call ended. The next morning, I drove down the coast before sunrise. The halcyon shimmered in the distance, the kind of beauty that hides its sins well. I arrived early enough to watch the vendors unload. The same people Olivia used to underpay, scold, or forget to credit. Now, they worked under me. They didn't know it yet, but they would. A young coordinator I'd trained years ago spotted me. "Ms. Cole?" she said softly, then lowered her voice. "Everything's running smoothly. Your instructions were followed exactly." I nodded. "Good. For everyone." Her smile was small but genuine. That tiny acknowledgement, a quiet act of respect, was worth more than all the hollow applause I'd ever earned. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with activity. Staff moved like clockwork, setting up the final decorations. The scent of white roses filled the air, sharp and sweet, like memory. Olivia's empire was on display, perfect, polished, oblivious. I wandered toward the far end of the room, where sunlight spilled through the tall windows. It painted streaks of gold across the marble. I thought of the workers I'd met over the years, the ones who stayed late to fix the impossible deadlines, who never got paid on time, who were told, "You should be grateful." Their stories had lived inside me, growing roots around my anger until the two became one. "This isn't just about my seat at the table," I whispered to the glass. "It's about every person they stepped on to sit there." The door creaked behind me. Ethan stepped in, dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. "Still sure about this?" he asked. "Yes." He crossed his arms. "If you do this, you'll expose everything: contracts, financial fraud, unpaid labor. They'll lose everything, and they'll know it was you. You won't be the avenger. You'll be the villain in their story." I met his eyes. "Then let me be the villain who told the truth." For a long moment he said nothing. Then quietly, "I just don't want you to lose yourself in the fire you started." He left without another word. When he was gone, I stood alone in the ballroom, surrounded by the ghostly rhythm of preparation. The chandeliers gleamed like witnesses. My pulse matched the tempo of footsteps and violin rehearsals. Part of me wanted to stop, to let them live in ignorance, to walk away knowing I'd already won. But then I thought of that florist, of the warehouse workers who never got their pay, of the assistants who cried in bathrooms after being told they should be grateful. If I stayed silent, I'd be no different from them. Justice, I realized, isn't about mercy. It's about visibility. That evening, as the sun dropped toward the horizon, I sat in my car overlooking the venue. Guests were arriving, limousines, photographers, laughter spilling out into the gold-tinted air. The wedding of the year, they called it, the event of a lifetime. My phone buzzed, a message from Lila Chen. "Got the files, confirming publication for tomorrow morning. Once it's live, everyone will know about the contracts." I stared at the screen. This was the point of no return. I typed back, "Do it. But make sure you include the workers' names, the ones who never got credited. This isn't just about the Coles." Her reply came fast. "Understood." I turned off my phone and watched the sunset blur across the Pacific. The first lights of the wedding glimmered through the ballroom glass. From a distance, it looked perfect, like the picture of a happy family. But I knew the foundation was already crumbling. Somewhere inside, Ethan was probably watching too, wondering if I'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Maybe I had. But justice was never tidy. I opened my car window and let the salt air rush in. For the first time, it didn't sting. "Let them have their night," I whispered. "Tomorrow belongs to the truth." The breeze caught my hair, carrying my words away toward the sea. I thought of Diane's old phrase, "You should be grateful, honey." Maybe I was, but not to them. I was grateful to the silence that had taught me to listen, to see what others ignored. And tomorrow, the world would hear what silence had been building all along. Malibu woke that morning drenched in gold. The ocean shimmered like a secret, and the halcyon gleamed against the horizon, perfect, unbothered, mine. Helicopters hovered above the cliffs, reporters already calling it the wedding of the year. Olivia's masterpiece, her empire, on display. I arrived just after dawn. The staff nodded politely, unaware the woman walking through the marble entrance owned every inch of this place. I wore white. Not bridal, but deliberate. A sharp ivory suit, the color of closure. Inside, the ballroom pulsed with preparation. Musicians tuning strings, planners rushing with clipboards, photographers testing light. I inhaled slowly, memorizing the chaos I had once created for her. Near the catering station, a familiar face appeared. Mateo, a chef I'd hired years ago, one of the many people Olivia had once underpaid. He caught my gaze and nodded subtly. "Good morning, Ms. Cole," he said quietly. "Everything's ready. For everyone." The words carried weight. Guests began to arrive. Politicians, investors, actors, all dressed to be seen. Champagne flowed. The chandeliers trembled with laughter and lies. And then, Olivia appeared. She was radiant in her gown, every step rehearsed for perfection. When she saw me, her smile froze just long enough to betray surprise. "Maddie, you came." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. She took my hand briefly, squeezing with polished affection. "It means a lot. Family always finds its way back, huh?" "Sometimes," I replied. "Sometimes it just takes a new address." Her brow furrowed for half a second before a guest called her name, pulling her away. Richard and Diane stood by the bar, elegant as ever, their laughter hollow. Watching them now, I realized I felt no hatred, only distance. The ceremony began at sunset. Music swelled, the aisle glittered, cameras flashed. Olivia glided toward her future husband like she'd been born for applause. The guests sighed, the orchestra played, and everything looked perfect. Almost. My phone buzzed once in my pocket. A message from Lila Chen. "It's live." I exhaled. 10 years of silence released in a single breath. The article was out. Every falsified contract, every unpaid worker, every stolen design. At first, no one noticed. Then the ripple started. Phones lit up like small fires. Whispers replaced music. Is this true? Fraud? The Coles? I thought they owned this place. Olivia's groom, Andrew, frowned as his best man handed him a phone. His face drained of color. Richard's hand went to his ear as if he could silence the news by force. Diane's lips parted, eyes darting across the murmuring crowd. I stayed where I was. Still. Composed. Then Andrew spoke aloud, voice tight. "Olivia, what the hell is this? Your company, your family, under investigation?" The room fell silent. Olivia turned to Richard, panic splintering her perfect posture. "Dad?" he barked. "It's a smear. Someone's sabotaging us." "Not someone," I said. My voice was calm, clear, cutting through the chaos. Heads turned. The orchestra stopped. Olivia looked at me like she'd seen a ghost. "You?" she whispered. I stepped forward, heels echoing against the marble. "You're standing in her house," I said. Richard frowned. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," I said, sliding a folder onto the nearest table. "This venue, your contracts, your so-called assets, they belong to Halcyon Holdings, formed 3 months ago under Madison Cole Enterprises." I met Olivia's eyes. "You wanted everything with your name on it. Congratulations, you're standing in mine." Silence. The kind that bends a room in half. Olivia's voice trembled. You bought the Halcyon? Yes, I said simply, with the money you said I'd never earn without you. Richard turned red, pointing at me. You think this makes you powerful? You'll regret this. I took a slow breath. Power doesn't require permission, Richard. You taught me that. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, from the back of the room, staff began to shift, quietly aligning, no longer afraid. The energy in the air changed, subtle but certain. Guests whispered, cameras clicked. Olivia's image, her perfect glossy empire, was unraveling before her eyes. I watched her face soften, confusion giving way to disbelief. You planned this? She whispered. No, I said softly. You did. I just stopped playing along. I turned toward the staff. Keep serving, please. The night doesn't have to end ugly. The orchestra hesitated, then resumed a fragile melody. The crowd stayed silent. The lights from the chandeliers caught the tears beginning to fall down Olivia's cheeks. I walked past her, toward the terrace doors, leaving the sound of breaking illusions behind me. Outside, the ocean roared, indifferent and endless. The wind carried the scent of salt and new beginnings. For the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten sister. I felt like the woman who had finally taken back her story. As I stood beneath the setting sun, I thought of Diane's favorite line. You should be grateful, honey. I smiled faintly. I am, I whispered to the wind. Just not to you. And when I turned back, the halcyon glowed behind me, beautiful, bruised, and finally mine. For a moment, the ballroom held its breath. The chandeliers trembled from the collective gasp that had just rippled through the crowd. Phones buzzed, whispers spread like smoke, and the hum of the orchestra died mid-note. Olivia stood frozen at the altar, her groom's hand slipping from hers. Richard's face turned an angry shade of crimson, while Diane looked as if she'd seen the ghost of her own ambition. And I, Madison Cole, the invisible one, the forgotten one, stood still in the chaos I'd predicted to the minute. Then came the question that would unravel everything. Where's the owner? Richard's voice thundered across the room. I want the owner of this damn place, now! The crowd turned, instinctively looking for someone in authority. The event manager, pale and trembling, stammered, Sir, I believe the owner is... I stepped forward. You're looking at her. It was a simple sentence, but it cut through the air like a blade. Dozens of heads swiveled in my direction. Richard's expression twisted in disbelief. You? Yes, I said, my tone calm, deliberate. I'm the owner. The Halcyon belongs to Halcyon Holdings LLC, acquired 3 months ago, filed and approved under Madison Cole Enterprises. Olivia took a step forward, her voice cracking. You can't be serious. You bought this place? I didn't buy it, I corrected. I reclaimed it. The silence that followed was thick enough to feel. Then Richard laughed. Too loud, too forced. This is ridiculous. You think you can just waltz in here and ruin your sister's wedding? For what? Revenge? I looked him square in the eye. No, Richard, for justice. He started toward me, but Ethan stepped into view from the edge of the room, his calm presence an invisible barrier. I'd reconsider that, he said smoothly. Any attempt to remove Ms. Cole from her own property would constitute trespassing. We have the filings, timestamps, and witnesses. Richard stopped. He wasn't used to hearing the word no. Meanwhile, Olivia's phone kept buzzing, notification after notification. The headlines were multiplying. Cole family under investigation. Fraud allegations linked to wedding empire. Exclusive venue ownership dispute. Sister versus sister. Her hands trembled. Maddie, what have you done? What I should have done a long time ago, I said. You built an empire on lies. I built one on silence. The difference? Mine was real. She stared at me, eyes glistening. You've ruined me. No, Olivia, I said quietly. I've revealed you. Behind her, the staff began to exchange glances. They had seen the contracts, the hours, the exploitation. They knew. And now, the world did too. I turned to the event coordinator. Please continue serving the guests. They came for a celebration. Let's give them one worth remembering. She hesitated, then nodded. The orchestra resumed, tentative at first, then steady. The music became the background to a scene no one would forget. A family empire collapsing under the weight of its own deceit. Ethan moved closer, speaking softly. Insurance and safety paperwork are next. You ready for the final step? I nodded. Do it. He handed me a document, a permit requirement, one Olivia's team had overlooked. The event couldn't continue without the legal signature of the venue owner. I took the pen. Funny, I murmured. They never asked who really owned the place. Richard noticed. What are you doing? Making it official, I said, signing my name with calm precision. Madison Cole. When I handed the paper to the inspector standing nearby, he nodded politely. Thank you, Ms. Cole. Everything's in order now. The words landed like a verdict. Olivia's knees gave slightly, her perfect composure cracking. Her groom whispered something sharp and stepped away from her. Cameras flashed. The audience, smelling scandal, captured every detail. The woman who once stood in her sister's shadow now standing at the center of her downfall. Still, I didn't smile. This wasn't triumph. It was truth. I walked to the microphone near the orchestra. The room went still again. Before we continue this evening, there's something I'd like to say, I began. My voice carried easily, steady, unhurried. This building was designed to honor beauty and connection, but somewhere along the way, it became a symbol of ownership, of who deserved to be seen. Today, it returns to what it was meant to be, a space for everyone who was ever told they didn't belong. A murmur spread through the crowd. Some people looked ashamed, others curious. I gestured toward the staff. These are the real architects of this day. The planners, the servers, the designers, the ones whose names never make it to the glossy magazines. You deserve to be seen. Applause began, hesitant, then growing. It wasn't loud, but it was honest. Olivia looked at me through tears she refused to let fall. Is this what you wanted, Maddie, to humiliate us? I shook my head. To hold you accountable. There's a difference. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The music swelled softly again, and the Pacific wind swept through the open doors, cooling the tension. Ethan approached quietly. It's done, he said. Contracts closed, accounts frozen. Legally, you've taken back everything. I nodded, eyes still on Olivia. No, not everything. Just what was mine. I turned toward the ocean, the sound of waves echoing like applause that didn't need permission. Behind me, I heard Richard mutter something under his breath, Diane whispering his name, Olivia sobbing softly. But I didn't look back. Some endings don't need witnesses. They need distance. When I reached the terrace doors, I paused and said one last thing. Not loud, but clear enough for them to hear. Justice doesn't humiliate, I said. It simply reveals. Then I stepped outside into the evening light, the first stars breaking through the horizon, and for the first time, the silence felt like peace. By the next morning, the world had already chosen sides. The headlines moved faster than the tide. Cole dynasty crumbles in Malibu scandal. Exposé reveals exploitation behind glamour. Madison Cole, the ghost who owned the Halcyon. For 10 years, they'd erased my name. Now, it was everywhere. I sat by the window of my coastal apartment, coffee growing cold beside me. Outside, the Pacific churned in restless waves, mirroring the noise of the city below. Reporters camped near the gates of the Halcyon, The same guests who had toasted Olivia yesterday were now feeding quotes to journalists, swearing they had no idea about the fraud. I didn't feel satisfaction, just inevitability. The phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Ethan's voice came first, calm but brisk. It's spreading faster than we predicted. The Financial Bureau is opening a preliminary review into their company holdings. Lila's story hit every major network. And the workers? I asked. Already being contacted for interviews. Their statements are verified. It's airtight. Good. There was a pause. Madison, this isn't just exposure. This is collapse. Olivia's company, your adoptive parents' investments, they're finished. I looked out at the ocean. Then it's about time they faced what they built. After he hung up, I opened my laptop. Thousands of messages filled my inbox. Congratulations, confessions, offers for interviews. But one subject line caught my eye. Thank you. From the people you saved. It was a group message from the small vendors who had worked under Aurora, my secret company, for a decade. Dozens of signatures filled the email. Simple words of gratitude. You didn't just give us work. You gave us dignity. That was the moment I allowed myself to breathe. But peace never lasts long when the truth starts burning. By noon, footage from the wedding was all over the internet. Olivia's pale face, Richard's fury, Diane's frozen shock. People slowed the clip where I stepped forward, replaying the words I'd said. You're standing in her house. It became a meme, then a quote, then a movement. But behind the noise, the collapse was cruel. The Cole brand, once a beacon of elite luxury, was disintegrating in real time. Clients withdrew contracts. Investors demanded refunds. Olivia's company accounts were frozen pending investigation. The house of cards had finally given way, but it didn't fall quietly. It shattered. By afternoon, Ethan and I met in a quiet cafe tucked into a side street. He'd been fielding press calls since morning, but his expression carried something between concern and admiration. You've started something bigger than you think, he said, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were photos of protests forming outside Cole headquarters. Small business owners, contractors, and former employees carried signs that read, "We deserve to be seen." They're not angry at you, he continued. They're inspired. You gave them proof that they weren't crazy, that what happened to them was real. I traced a finger along one of the photos. A florist I recognized, someone Olivia once dismissed for being too provincial. He was standing in the front row, smiling. Maybe the world needed a mirror, I said softly. Ethan studied me. Are you ready for what comes next? This kind of storm doesn't end when the truth breaks. It keeps circling until it finds a villain. And they're already writing you into that role. I smirked. Let them. Heroes don't build empires quietly. Still, when I went home that night, the silence returned, thick and uneasy. My phone buzzed with another message, an unknown number. You've ruined everything. Hope you're proud. Olivia. I stared at the message for a long time, the part of me that had once loved her, the sister I'd begged to see me, ached for a second. Then I typed back, I didn't ruin it, I revealed it. And I turned off my phone. The next day brought more chaos. Financial networks confirmed mass withdrawals from Cole Investments. A leaked email from Richard to his board revealed panic. Find out what she has. Find out how she did it. They still didn't understand. I didn't need to destroy them. The truth did that for me. At noon, Lila called. The follow-up's ready. We're publishing the names of the underpaid staff. They'll finally get the credit they deserve. But Madison, are you sure you want your name in this one? It makes you the face of the story. I hesitated, watching seagulls cut through the sky. Yes, I said. Put it there. No more hiding. An hour later, the headline appeared: From Shadow to Owner, Madison Cole's Quiet Empire of Justice. The article wasn't about vengeance, it was about restoration, about the people behind the glamour, the invisible ones. It quoted me only once. Kindness doesn't mean letting people step on you, it means standing tall enough to lift others with you. It was strange seeing my words on a screen, no longer buried behind someone else's credit. That evening, Ethan arrived unannounced. He looked exhausted, but proud. "You know what's happening right now?" he asked, handing me his tablet. On the screen was a live stream. Olivia standing on the steps of the Halcyon, my Halcyon, facing reporters. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling as microphones crowded around her. She was admitting everything. "I took credit for what wasn't mine," she said, voice breaking. "My sister, Madison, did the work. I let pride turn me into something I never wanted to be." The crowd murmured. Cameras clicked. Ethan looked at me. "You didn't plan for this." "No," I whispered. But maybe she needed to say it. I watched Olivia struggle to compose herself, her voice shaking but real. "She didn't destroy us. She just stopped letting us pretend." For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was fighting. I felt seen. When the broadcast ended, Ethan closed the tablet. "You won," he said simply. I shook my head. "No." I reminded them who they were. "That's different." Outside, the ocean wind howled against the glass, fierce but cleansing. Tomorrow, there would be more headlines, more fallout, more noise. But for tonight, there was quiet. The kind that doesn't suffocate. The kind that heals. 3 days after the story broke, the Halcyon was quiet again. The reporters had gone, the police tape was gone, and the last of the guests had been escorted out under a sky that no longer glittered. What was left was stillness, honest and heavy. I stood alone in the grand ballroom, the same room that had once witnessed their laughter, their arrogance, their downfall. The scent of lilies still lingered faintly, but the rest was gone, the glamour, the illusion, the noise. What remained was truth, stripped bare. It was strange, walking through the aftermath of a victory. The marble floor reflected my steps with eerie precision, like it was asking if I felt lighter now. I didn't. Power is exhilarating when you chase it, but when you finally hold it, it just feels quiet. Ethan had offered to meet me that morning, but I'd asked for space. There was something I needed to do alone, something heavier than revenge. I climbed the staircase toward the bridal suite. The door was half open, the air thick with the faint smell of perfume and wilted flowers. Olivia sat by the mirror in her ruined gown, the same dress she'd worn when everything fell apart. The fabric, once glowing, now dulled like a memory overstayed. She didn't look up when I entered. Her reflection met mine instead, 2 women who had finally run out of performances. "I was wondering when you'd come," she said quietly. Her voice was hoarse, like it hadn't spoken in days. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." She gave a brittle laugh. "Want? I'm not sure what I want anymore." I took a step closer. The silence between us was almost unbearable, filled with all the things we never said when we were still pretending to be sisters. Olivia's eyes, red and raw, flicked to mine in the mirror. "You won," she said. "You took everything back. Are you happy now?" I thought about the question longer than I expected. "No," I admitted. "Not happy, just finished." That word seemed to land somewhere deep in her. She turned toward me, her hands trembling. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To our family?" "I didn't destroy your family, Olivia," I said softly. "I just stopped protecting it from itself." Her breath caught. "I loved you, Maddie. I really did. I just needed me to stay small," I finished. Because my silence made you feel taller. She looked away, shame flooding her face. I never meant to hurt you. I know, I said. You just never meant to notice. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Outside, the sound of waves filled the space, steady and forgiving in a way we weren't yet capable of. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I placed it on the vanity between us. She stared at it like it might burn her. What is this? Money, I said. A check. Enough to cover what you owe the contractors, the assistants, the laborers who kept this place running while you took the credit. She shook her head slowly. You're giving me money? I'm giving them money, I corrected. You'll deliver it. Olivia blinked, her voice shaking. Why are you doing this? After everything? Why? Because this isn't about punishing you, I said. It's about ending the pattern. Someone has to pay the debt, not just in dollars, but in conscience. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. For the first time in years, she didn't argue. She didn't perform. She just nodded, tears finally falling, silent and real. I don't know if I can fix any of it, she whispered. You can start, I said. When she looked up again, her reflection didn't look like the Olivia I'd known. It looked like a woman facing herself for the first time. You know, she said softly, I thought revenge would make you cruel, but you look free. I smiled faintly. Revenge is just justice without peace. I wanted peace. A small, broken laugh escaped her. You always were the better one. No, I said, shaking my head. Just the one who got tired of pretending. We sat there for a long time, two women bound by blood that wasn't real, but pain that was. The air between us softened, not warm yet, but no longer sharp. Finally, Olivia stood. She walked to the window, staring out at the waves below. Do you think people can really change? I think people can learn, I said. Change is just what happens after they decide to stop lying to themselves. She nodded slowly, still looking at the horizon. Then maybe this is my start. When I left the room, she was still standing there, the sunlight catching the edge of her hair, the ocean wind moving the curtains behind her. I didn't know if she'd keep her promise, but I hoped she would. Downstairs, Ethan was waiting by the main doors. He didn't speak when he saw me, just searched my face. Well? He asked finally. It's done, I said. He studied me for a moment. You look lighter. I left something behind. What? The part of me that needed them to say sorry. We walked outside together. The evening light spilled across the sea, turning the surface to glass. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without weight. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about absolving them. Maybe it was about freeing myself from the gravity of what they'd done. As we reached the car, Ethan said, You know, this could still go further. Lawsuits, media cycles. Let it, I said. The story will live on its own now. He nodded. So what will you do next? I looked back at the Halcyon, the building glowing faintly in the fading sun. I'll rebuild, but not for them. For everyone who never had a seat. Ethan smiled quietly. That's poetic. No, I said, watching the ocean rise and fall. It's overdue. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and endings. I turned toward the car, the world behind me fading into silence. For the first time, that silence didn't feel like exile. It felt like peace. 6 months later, the Halcyon no longer smelled like champagne or deceit. The marble floors still gleamed, the chandeliers still shimmered, but the air had changed. It carried laughter that didn't sound rehearsed, footsteps that didn't fear hierarchy. We were hosting our first Aurora Foundation Gala, a charity event for youth in foster care and young adults aging out of the system. My system. My past. The irony wasn't lost on me. Outside, banners fluttered in the warm Malibu breeze, building futures through dignity. Inside, volunteers arranged handwritten name cards at every seat, each one carefully crafted, no one left out. I'd made sure of it. Every person in the room had a place, from the caterers to the custodial staff, to the teenagers we'd invited from shelters. It wasn't about status, it was about presence. I walked through the hall as the final preparations took shape. The staff greeted me with nods that weren't fearful, but genuine. Some called me Ms. Cole, others just Madison. Either was fine. At the center of the ballroom, a long table stretched like a spine of belonging. No velvet ropes, no VIP section, just names, all written in the same ink. I stopped when I reached mine, Madison Cole, printed neatly on a small card beside a simple white rose. Across from me, a second seat waited, empty. I rested my hand on its back, feeling the quiet hum of what it symbolized. For years, I'd chased acknowledgement, thinking it came from others. But this seat, the one with my name finally where it belonged, meant something else entirely. I hadn't claimed victory. I'd claimed visibility. The music began, soft and low. Guests filtered in, a mix of familiar faces and new ones. Among them were the contractors who'd once been underpaid by the Coles, now successful business owners in partnership with Aurora. The teenagers walked in shyly, dressed in donated suits and dresses, their eyes wide at the chandeliers above them. "Ms. Cole," one of them said, a boy no older than 17. "Is it true this place used to be, well, something else?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "But everything changes once you decide to rebuild it with honesty." He nodded, eyes bright. "I want to build things too. Maybe one day I'll design a place like this." "You won't have to design like this," I told him. "You'll design better." When the guests were seated, the lights dimmed, and a soft spotlight found the stage. Ethan approached the microphone, his voice steady. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being part of tonight's Aurora Foundation Gala. This event exists because one woman decided to turn silence into legacy." He looked at me as the applause rose, gentle, sincere. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking against marble that once echoed humiliation, now dignity. The applause quieted. The faces before me blurred into a sea of expectation. I took a breath. 6 months ago, I began, I was told I didn't deserve a seat at a table I helped build. I believed it, for far too long. But today, I stand in a room full of people who remind me that no one's worth is defined by who invites them to sit. A pause. The words landed heavier than I expected. This building used to represent everything that was wrong with success: vanity, exclusion, control. We rebuilt it to mean something else. Every person here helped make that possible. From the volunteers to the youth joining us tonight, you are proof that dignity doesn't require permission. The audience was silent. Some wiped their eyes, others just listened. I smiled. A year ago, I was told I wasn't worthy of a seat. So I built the table. And tonight, every seat belongs to someone who earned it. Applause erupted, thunderous, not for the spectacle, but for the shared truth behind it. At one of the side tables, I noticed Olivia. She'd come quietly, unannounced, dressed simply, without photographers or fanfare. When our eyes met, she didn't look away. She gave a small, tentative nod. She was volunteering tonight, helping guide a group of foster teens through the exhibit we'd set up. An art display of drawings and dreams from kids who'd been told, as I once had, that they were lucky just to be chosen. I watched her kneel beside a young girl, adjusting the hem of her borrowed dress, whispering something kind. For the first time in my life, my sister looked human. Not perfect, not polished, human. Maybe that was her redemption. Maybe it was mine too. As the night went on, Laughter returned to the halcyon, not the brittle laughter of status, but the kind that fills spaces built on kindness. People danced. Conversations wove through the room like music. Later, when the guests had gone and the candles were burning low, I sat alone at the long table. The empty chair beside me waited, quietly symbolic. I rested my fingertips on my name card and smiled. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was renewal. Outside, the waves crashed gently against the cliffs, their rhythm steady and eternal. The world had changed, but it hadn't ended. It had simply begun again, on fairer ground. I whispered softly, half to the sea, half to the girl I used to be. You made it, and you made it matter. As the last light flickered across the ballroom, I stood, looking once more at the empty seat beside me. Keep it open, I told the staff as they cleared the tables. Someone else will need it someday. They nodded. When I stepped out onto the terrace, the wind carried the faintest echo of applause, the kind that doesn't need an audience, because it comes from within. Finally, Madison did not win by revenge. She won by daring to stand tall in the light, in a place where people once told her she didn't deserve to be seen. Justice sometimes doesn't need applause. It only needs a peaceful heart after the storm. The chair bearing her name today is not a symbol of power, but a reminder. If you've ever been looked down on, don't turn yourself into an avenger. Become the proof that kindness can also stand up. What about you? If one day the person who once hurt you has to sit in front of you, will you choose revenge? Or choose to end it by making them see the real you? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Who knows? The story you tell next might become someone else's way of healing.